Well, ladies and gentlemen, the High Commissioner for Human Rights has just finished her briefing to the members of the Security Council on many topics, including the situation prevailing in my country, Syria. You have all heard what she has just said before leaving this podium with regard her personal impression about the situation, her own assessment with regard the situation prevailing in Syria. You have heard her referring to her first stance adopted in August 2011. This is what she said. 2011, August, that means a couple months after the beginning of the crisis in Syria. And she made reference to this assessment that she gave in August 2011, while the crisis was at its early stage. And in this assessment, she referred to violations of human rights by both parties, as she said, the government forces and the terrorist armed groups. That confirms and corroborates in itself her biased reading of the situation in Syria from the beginning. Unfortunately, the High Commissioner for Human Rights has permitted herself and her very important and sensitive position as UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to be used as a tool of pressure against the Syrian government from the beginning. She has become an integral part of this orchestrated campaign by some influential members in the Council to exert pressure on the Syrian government every time they needed her to come to the Security Council to be part of this political pressure. So no wonder that France, Britain, USA delegations called on her to come today to be an integral part of this orchestrated campaign of pressure on my government. It's really pitiful that in her briefing inside the Council, as well as in her briefing to you as reporters accredited to the United Nations, Mrs. Amos did not address the issue of the Takfiri's terrorist groups operating in Syria, and she did not make any reference to their presence by dozens of thousands on the Syrian soil, fighting the government, perpetrating crimes, massacring people, civilians, slaughtering innocent people. She forgot to make any reference about what's going on in Kasab, these terrorist groups that came, Al-Nusra Front and the Islamic Front and other terrorist groups who came from within Turkish territory and slaughtered civilian Syrians. Most of them are from Armenian descent in the area of Kasab, where the fights are still going on, as you know. She should have at least shed some light on this very important issue, because it might be a reason of a wider conflagration in the area and a reason of a very serious military escalation. She did not mention any word with regard to the Turkish government's involvement in these terrorist activities, whether in Kasab or in other areas. One of you asked her about this very important information with regard to the Seymour Hersh article pertaining to the direct involvement of the Turkish government of Erdogan in the massacres and use of chemical weapons in the suburbs of Damascus on August the 21st of last year. As if this issue is not part of her mandate. Her mandate is only to corner the Syrian government and to be an integral part of this orchestrated campaign within the Security Council, so that the Syrian government would be addressed by the ICC according to her wishful thinking. This is really an awful situation coming from the High Commissioner for Human Rights. She is acting irresponsibly. She is going beyond her mandate, and she is not protecting human rights, but she is allowing terrorists, takfiris, and some governments, Saudi, Qatari, Turkish, to go on slaughtering the Syrian civilian people, as well as to defy the government, any government in the world, including the influential governments inside the Council or those who are deeply involved in the bloodshed in Syria, have the right to defend the order inside their countries, and all governments have this right in accordance with the constitutions to guarantee the safety and security of the population. So once again, in spite of all this information related to the Turkish government's involvement, here I'm referring to the Seymour Hersh article, I'm referring to the audio tape leak that confirmed the personal involvement of the Turkish Minister for Foreign Affairs as well as the head of the intelligence in Turkey into bluffing the public opinion and prefabricating a false flag reason to invade Syria, militarily speaking. As if all these important information is not part of her mandate. This is why she didn't address these issues. As if Mrs. Amos did not hear about the presence of thousands and thousands of Saudis, terrorists, Kuwaitis. The last wave in Kasab, most of them are from Morocco and Tunisia. This is not part of her mandate. This is not part of her mandate. Her mandate is, as I said, only to respond positively to these manipulation moves by the influential members in the Council, so that the issue of Syria should be raised today in their deliberations in order to prepare the ground for further draft resolution or whatsoever with regard referring the Syrian government to the ICC. She has become lunatic in her action and is behaving irresponsibly. Please.
الأدلة التي قدمها سيمور هيرش وتلك التي برزت في الشريط المسجل الذي تسرب في تركيا تجاهلت كليا هذه المسائل. هل قدمتم أي رسائل أو توضيحات أو أشرطة أخرى لمجلس الأمن ولمجلس حقوق الإنسان من أجل متابعة المسائل الخطيرة جدا، خاصة بعدما تسرب حول أن المعارضة استخدمت الأسلحة الكيميائية في الغوطة؟
نحن وجهنا عشرات الرسائل بشكل عام، لكن مؤخرا نحن وجهنا باسم الحكومة 10 رسائل حول موضوع التسريب الذي حصل في مكتب وزير الخارجية حرفيا، والعدوان التركي المباشر العسكري على منطقة كسب التي تقع على الحدود بين سوريا وتركيا. هذا يعني خلافا، يعني بغض النظر عن الاجتماعات واللقاءات الثنائية التي أجريها مع السفراء المعنيين ومع كبار موظفي الأمم المتحدة. نعم، نحن أخبرنا الأمين العام عبر مديرة مكتبه، وتحدثت أنا شخصيا مع السيد الياسون ومع كبار مسؤولي الأمم المتحدة حول هذا التصعيد التركي الخطير وهذا التلاعب بالحقيقة على الأرض. مقال الكاتب الأمريكي سيمور هيرش مهم جدا، لأنه عندما يتقاطع مع قصة التسريب الذي جرى في مكتب وزير الخارجية فإنه يؤكد بشكل قطعي ضلوع الحكومة التركية في مسألة أولا الهجوم بالأسلحة الكيماوية على السكان المدنيين السوريين في الغوطة في 21 آب 2013. ثانيا ضلوع الحكومة التركية في تصعيد الموقف العسكري في سوريا وفبركة عدوان ودفع الرئيس الأمريكي أوباما دفعا للتدخل العسكري في سوريا بحجة أن الحكومة السورية قد تجاوزت الخط الأحمر. لكن مقال سيمور هيرش بمنتهى الأهمية، لأنه يظهر أنه حتى الرئيس أوباما كان مدركا لهذه المناورات التركية ولهذا السلوك الذي يجافي أبسط قواعد القانون الدولي وأحكام الميثاق من جانب الحكومة التركية.
Geneva talks. There's various, the State Department gets asked this every day. Is there Geneva 3? Is there Geneva 2 pause? What's the position of your government on those talks? And also, the Secretary General is going down to D.C. on Friday, and he's meeting with Chuck Hagel and Martin Dempsey, two military figures. And I just wanted to know, I asked today whether Syria is one of his topics, but what do you think of a Secretary General of the United Nations? I mean, do you think it's appropriate? Has he met with military figures of other similarly sized or differently viewed countries? Do you have any view on that?
Number one, with regard to Geneva talks, we are waiting for the finalization of the consultations by the Mr. Al-Ibrahimi. So far, he did not get back to the capital with any proposal. The second issue is that actually we have had serious observations with regard some contacts that the Secretary General has been doing during his second term, actually, even at the end of his first term. You may remember that the Secretary General concluded an agreement with the NATO alliance in 2008 without referring and getting back to the Security Council members and without consulting the full membership of the United Nations, and I mean the General Assembly. So indeed, we have question marks with this regard. Hopefully, the Secretary General is going to raise the wisdom voices in his meetings with these military men in Washington, and to reflect the peaceful nature of the United Nations based on the settlement of conflicts by peaceful means and peaceful settlement. Yes.
Thank you. Shukran, Sayyid Safir. I will ask the question in English.
Please.
Do you believe, as the Secretary General does, that the conflict in Syria has no military solution? Shukran.
Of course, of course. We said it many times, and we participated at the Geneva talks based on this conviction. Of course, we believe in that, and we are seeking a peaceful settlement of the political peaceful settlement of the Syrian crisis, led by the Syrians themselves. And this is in accordance with Kofi Annan's plan and the Security Council resolution 2118, as well as all other references related to the consensual international approach with regard to the solution of the Syrian crisis. But we cannot, of course, we cannot do it alone. We need those influential parties who have serious influence over the lunatic terrorist groups to make serious pressure on them so that they would stop invading our territory and they would stop killing our civilians and they would stop violating our sovereignty.
Ambassador, when you talk about foreign fighters, do you include Iranians and Hezbollah amongst them? And secondly, Ms. Pillay said all sides had a lot of human rights abuses. And according to her earlier reports, bombing from the air and gassing from the ground inflicted a lot more damage.
Mrs. Pillay did not visit Syria till now. During 3 years of the crisis, she didn't go to Syria. So she is speaking out of her own box. She doesn't have any information, credible information with regard to what's going on in Syria. She neglected many times to listen to reports emanating and stemming from UN agencies, officers in Damascus. She doesn't listen to these reports. She just listens to reports coming from what she calls the camps of the Syrian refugees in the neighboring countries, where many, of course, opponents are in these camps. So she is manipulating, bluffing the truth, and she is biased. She is using her position, very important and sensitive position, in favor of making further pressure on the Syrian government. And this is a violation of her own mandate. And this is a violation of our own rights as member states. We elected her to represent us not to work for other agendas.
Mr. Ambassador, am I right to understand that you are basically denying the allegation of human rights abuse on the government side? And another question
Absolutely, we said it many times. We are not only denying, we are saying that these accusations are false and do not have any credibility whatsoever. The members of the so-called Independent Commission of Inquiry did not visit Syria. They don't know what's going on in Syria, and they don't listen to our own reports. I have sent on behalf of my government over 500 letters. They didn't read these letters. They don't listen to our statements. They do it on purpose so that our voice wouldn't be heard by the so-called international community. All that is an integral part of an orchestrated campaign to corner the Syrian government and to diabolize the Syrian government. Thank you so much. I would like to refer you to this article published in the New York Times a couple of days ago. It's an interview with this Saudi Sheikh Awad, in which he acknowledges the presence of thousands of Saudi terrorists in Syria. It's in the New York Times, by the way.
My question is about this Israeli incursion into Syria and the clashes over there. And the Syrian government has not responded to them. What do you talk? Why don't you say something about that? That in the past, that the Israelis have been coming in and having incursions into Syria. The Israeli.
There is. I said it many times, and here it's a good time to reiterate it. There is an alliance, military alliance and political, between the Turkish government and Israel on one hand, with the assistance of the Qatari and the Saudis, to fight the Syrian government and to send lunatic terrorists inside Syria, takfiris, in order to perpetrate terrorist acts against the Syrian people and against the Syrian infrastructure, and to defy the Syrian military too. So this is effectively an alliance, military alliance between Israel, the Turkish government, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia.
Have you determined as to how many countries these so-called religious fighters are coming from?
83 countries. Terrorists are coming from 83 countries. Yes. The last wave in the Kasab areas, in the fighting in the Kasab area, most of them are from Morocco and Tunisians and Kuwaitis, and they all, of course, came from within Turkish territory, as you know. Something that was not denied by the Turkish government, by the way. Thank you so much.
Thank you.